Hi, Doc.
Hi, Annabelle.
Thank you for talking to me today. We are just going to have a little bit of a chat around your experience, and you've got quite an interesting career switch behind you. So we're just going to kind of dig into that a little bit. But before we start, could you please just tell us a little bit about your military career?
Yeah, certainly. I don't tell many people, but I actually tried to join the Royal Marines before I joined the army. I'd only just, I was 16 when I first applied, and only just 17
Hmm.
when I first actually joined the Marines and started training with them. That was a lot to take in when you're 17. I'd never been away from home before, and all of a sudden I was away for 32 weeks on a pretty arduous sort of training
Yeah.
course. I did just over 12 weeks, and then was like, no, this isn't for me, not right now. I need to.
Yeah.
Like, I was super homesick, to be honest. I was like really struggling with being away from home. So I made the decision to leave that for a bit, go home, look at some other stuff, but always with the intention of going back and finishing that, going back to the Marines, and like I enjoyed it. It was just not the right time. It felt like so I gave it a year or so, got some sort of other odd jobs in between, and then went back to the careers office to join the Marines again and give it a second chance. And it just so happened the local careers office was a tri-service careers office, so it's got the RAF, the Army, and the Navy all in one. And I was on my way through to the
Okay.
Navy area to speak to the Marine dude, and I just got collared by the Army guy. He's like, "Where are you going? What are you doing? Like, why?" And I explained, and he's like, "Just come and have a chat. Like, come and have a sit down with me." And that was it. The next thing I was signed up to join the Army, which was interesting because yeah, I obviously didn't go there with that intention. But then join the military, you do a load of tests, and they sort of decide to channel you into different careers. Basically, a lot of the time it's where they need you, but it's also supposed to
Hmm.
be sort of dependent on what your results of this testing and stuff like that. So, but interestingly, I got channeled towards aircraft, towards aviation engineering, which kind of aligned with like I was super interested in that anyway. Like engineering as a whole, I'd always like much more with cars and stuff like that. I'd always had an interest in it, and it sounded exciting to me. Like, I had been sick of being in a classroom at school and college and that, and I was excited to join getting something else. Ironically, you join the army, you do the basic training, really cool, loads of running around, 12 weeks of that everyone goes through initially. And then the next part was almost 2 years of classroom work again, which was a bit of a
Oh,
kick
no.
in the teeth because that's what I'd been trying to escape. But it was more enjoyable because it was interesting to me. So it was really good. But yeah, really cool then, got into
Okay.
aviation. It's like quite a clear pathway within aviation when you're in the army. Like you tick certain boxes, you do certain courses, and your progression's pretty linear, providing you keep your nose clean. So yeah, super enjoyed it. Really interesting career. Got to go to loads of interesting, sort of exciting places, stuff I would never have done, which was like the whole reason of joining the military. It was like what you signed up for. You got shown all the videos in the careers office of people mucking around on beaches and going to cool places. Yeah, you got to do a lot of that. So
Yeah.
really exciting.
Okay. So even though you were coerced into the army and not not the Marines, it was you still really loved it.
Yeah, it was good. Like I say, it was weird because that hadn't been my intention, but it was. I knew I wanted to be in the military. I obviously, school was a struggle. Like I didn't enjoy that sort of classroom environment. Like sort of doing the same kind of stuff all the time. And then I'd worked in between the Marines and I worked in a garage doing some stuff. I did like an MOT tester's assessment, and it was just like I don't know, the same day, like the repetitive nature of it. I knew
Yeah.
that was the attraction of the military of like every day's going to be different. You're going to be doing different stuff all the time. Yeah. And it is like that. It is very varied.
Yeah. Okay. So fast forward then to when you're coming towards the end of your time serving. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like why you wanted to leave, how the process was?
Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting because traditionally, you sign on for 22 years, 22-year open service agreement is called. With the pension that I signed up on, 22 years, a real cool milestone to hit. Like it's a very good in terms of your pension and sort of what happens after that. It's really good to hit that milestone. I left at the 16-year point, which like previously had been pretty unheard of. Like a lot of people, once you get to 16 years, it's you might as well push on, do that last six, and get to that 22-year point. But there had been some changes made to the pension, which kind of I took into account as I was making my decision. But the biggest thing for me was it was family, to be honest, and it's something interestingly now that I hear it's got to be one of the top sort of three reasons that I hear when I'm speaking to people now who are doing the same thing. It's like the military is cool and you do loads of cool stuff, you go to loads of cool places, but it's very tumultuous. There's a lot you don't
Mm.
know. Sometimes you'll pop into work on a Monday and you're being sent to Scotland for 2 weeks and you didn't know you're missing kids' sports days, parents' evenings, you're missing birthdays and
Yeah.
stuff, and that starts to take its toll. And especially as when you've got a young family, like it's cool when you're young, you don't mind that. It's really exciting to go to different places every couple of years and to get sent to all these different exercises and that. But as you get a little bit older, you're looking for a little bit more stability. There are roles in the military where you can find that, but for me, like I knew I was going to be working away again a lot, and yeah, just made that decision. Let's start looking for something that gives me a little bit more stability at home. It
Yeah.
wasn't a decision; it was a tricky decision. Like I sort of saw myself doing the full time. To be honest, I didn't think I would be getting out early, and it was it was a scary thing to do. It really was. Like even going in to tell my boss that I was doing it, it was like a really scary.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, especially if it's kind of like all you've really known in your career up to date. What role did you go into when you left?
So I left at a weird time. So I handed in my notice in 2019, and
Mm.
then we just started to get COVID coming along. Um,
Of course.
so that kind of changed things. So I was really lucky in my last posting, the last place I worked, where with cutting a long story short, military aviation, it's exactly the same as civil aviation. You're doing the same thing. You do the
Okay.
same course. It's the same skills. It's exactly the same job. It just there's military aircraft and there's civil aircraft. If you've done a full career on military aircraft, that's the experience is recognised, but the qualifications aren't when you get out. So it's super frustrating. You've done all this great training, but it doesn't translate into what's called a licensed aviation when you get out. I was really lucky in my last posting where, because of the nature of what we were doing, the aircraft we were working on, I got that qualification through the military. So that opened up like a whole range of aviation jobs, engineer, which is like, if you're doing it off your own back in your own time, it's 6 ages, it's a real hard thing to do. So I was really lucky to
Yeah.
get it in my last posting. So just because I'd invested all that time in aviation, because I got this really cool qualification that opens a lot of opportunities, I didn't look at anything else. I'll be honest. I was like, well, this is me. I'm
Yeah.
an aircraft engineer. This is what I've done. No one sort of pointed me otherwise. I did the career transition stuff with the military, and it was the same sort of thing. It sort of reinforced what I'd been thinking anyway. You're an aviation engineer. This is what you've done. Look at all these opportunities, all these jobs. So I didn't veer off that path at all, to be honest. The only scary thing was just because of the time, the nature of when I was doing it. Aviation obviously took a pretty big hit during COVID. So I
Yeah.
went from about 6 months out, my feet up, looking at all these opportunities and just trying to decide like which job I was going to take, to get into the sort of 3 month period and panicking, to be honest. Like a lot of stuff had
Yeah.
disappeared, a lot of opportunities had disappeared. I got to the stage where I started applying for like anything with the word engineering. Like I was cat food
Wow.
companies going to look after the conveyor belts in their factory and stuff like that. It got pretty sketchy towards the end, pretty panicky. I was super lucky because of my hierarchy where I worked in the last posting. They were really good, and because of what was going on, they sort of said, "Oh, right up till the last day. If you can't find anything, if it all goes wrong, we'll pretend this didn't happen. We'll tear up your notice and just turn
Oh
around and come
wow.
back," sort of thing. So, which was lucky, and that's not the norm. It was very much down
Yeah.
to like my bosses at the time, just taking into account what was happening and looking after me, which was great. But I'm one of those. I've made a decision. I didn't want to sort of backtrack on
Yeah.
it, no matter what was going on. Stuck to my guns with it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they were pleased with the prospect of you maybe staying on.
Yeah, it was interesting. I got offered the last place I served was super cool as well, and it's like a really fought over position. So not many people get it. I think there's 10 people who do my job who work there. So normal unit, you're looking at like 50, 60 people. My
Okay.
last job was 10, and you had to sort of fight to get there. You had to be recognised, you had to be recommended. So it was a lot of people want to go, and I was super lucky where they did at that point. They went, look, we'll keep you here for another couple of years if you want. We'll do this. So it was really tempting to turn around and go,
Mm.
no, I'll stay. Thanks. Here's the safety of the army. I'll go back, sort of thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
stuck to my guns.
Yeah. And you did find somewhere?
I did, and it was kind of networking, but not. What would you say? Like not overt networking. It was someone in my network who got in touch and went, "Look, have you considered this?" And
Nice.
I got in touch, sorry, with the hiring manager, and he was an ex-REME aircraft engineer who knew of me through the REME. I'd never met him, but he knew me.
Mm.
It was like the ideal situation. The interview was done on his driveway in deck chairs with a cup of tea because we were socially distancing, and it was pretty much a come and have a look. If you like it, you can start, sort of thing. So
Oh,
yeah, I was
amazing.
super lucky in that respect. But it was like I think I had one other option at that time, so it was pretty tight
Mm.
down to the wire.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so how long did you work that role for?
So just 2 years, just over 2 years, I think.
Okay. And then you had another career switch, right? How
Did a
did
bit
you
of a
realize that
pivot.
that wasn't for you? Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so the one thing that I really enjoyed about the military was like there's definitely a common sort of purpose. Like you can
Mm.
really you're all on a team, you're all working towards something, and you know what it is, like the goal is. Like, which is super enjoyable. It's something I really liked about the military, and especially in the last place I worked, it was like a real clear, tangible, like we're doing this for this to happen, and then
Mhm.
look what you've achieved, sort of thing. By doing this, we've achieved this, which is really cool. I really like that. I like seeing the result
Yeah.
of like what your effort and your work. And I just started to the next aircraft role was just it was lacking that a little bit. Like it was still a cool, it still sort of had a cool purpose, but it was just a I don't know. It was like it was repetitive, which is obviously what I tried to get away from initially.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just lacking that kind of, I don't know. I was in there treating it like I did the military, where we're in, let's all
Mm.
go, we're on this mission, we're getting these, we're doing this. And then there's other people I was working alongside who were being paid the same, who were sort of as respected as me. And they were sort of kicking their heels and happy to play on their mobile phones and not really get too involved and sort of take the wage at the end of the day. And that just started to, I don't know, it
Yeah.
was starting to give me itchy feet a little bit. So I was at a point
Yeah.
just for that 2 year period where I started to look and I started to apply for some other opportunities, like look at some other roles, something that maybe
Mm.
aligned more with what I wanted.
That's interesting that you say your skill set in the military, you can be an aircraft engineer in the military and then you can flip that and you're doing the same job, but like fundamentally it is different in terms of the lacking the
Yeah,
mission. That's
yeah.
interesting.
Maybe I approached it in the wrong way, and maybe it's because it was that first role out of the military that I was
Mm.
expecting it to be so like everyone to be as bought in as I was and to be as behind it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it may be that a bit naive perhaps, but yeah, it was just missing
Yeah.
it a little bit for me.
Yeah. And then, so where did you go next? What happened?
Well, so around that time, when I was looking for a role, an opportunity with a purpose. I'd had a couple of interviews, interestingly, but in the meantime, I'd served with Ben. We knew each other very well. We'd always stayed in
Yeah.
touch. We'd been close, and he'd been keep me up to date with his project, what he'd been doing with Redeployable, and obviously been listening to my woes about my job and what the problems I've been having and what I was looking for. And yeah, he kind of propositioned me at that point. He came to me with
Yeah.
like, come and join me. It's the first hire at Redeployable. This is what I'm doing. This is the mission. This is what I see you doing. What do you think? So I left my stable, well-paid engineering job to join a brand new tech startup, much to my wife's delight.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, okay, so aside from Ben selling the dream, and we've all been there, what was it about a startup world in particular then that you liked the sound of?
Johnny, it stemmed back to that purpose, having a purpose. So I really liked
Yeah.
the mission, the idea, and because I'd been not a victim of, but fallen foul of not exploring other opportunities as I left the military, and that mission to like, let's expose people to all these other amazing careers that their skills fit with. That really sort of landed with me. It really made an impact. And then the other thing was the like what kind of referred to earlier of like being able to see the result of your work. Like I joined a big company when I left the army. The military's weird. It's
Yeah.
big, but it's not like you're in a big some stuff is policy and stuff, like you're in a massive company, but most of the time you're working in these little units where you're seeing your output sort of thing. I joined a massive engineering company and that wasn't really there. And then the attraction of the startup was, well, look, we're so small. There's so much going on that, and you know yourself, like if you have a good week, the company feels it. It's like really tangible what you're achieving, and like I like that. I like seeing the the result of your hard work like quickly. It's nice.
Yeah, definitely. But it is like undeniably that's a huge career switch. Like it's completely different. Was that in itself challenging, or was it easier than you thought? Like how was that?
Do you know? I think, and again, I go back to the military. Yeah, it's a big organization, but I think it's much more like a startup than people think. Like when you're like in these little units, you're trying to make stuff happen. It's quite scrappy. You're often wearing more than one hat. Like you get 2 or 3 things to look after. You're often chucked in at the deep end of stuff where you've got to make something work with minimal training, minimal kit, minimal time. And that's very similar. I didn't recognize that initially, but now having been in the startup world for a couple of years, there's quite a lot of crossover from being in the military and sort of getting stuff done.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. So do you have can you think of any advice that you would have for anyone, particularly a service leaver who is considering life in a startup?
Yeah, I think for me, the most important thing is make sure you've got some passion for the objective. Like make sure you're sort of behind what's going on, because it is hard work. You do end up doing some weird hours. You do end up doing things you don't necessarily want to do, you don't like. So you need to be bought into it. You need to have some passion for it to succeed. It's not like joining a massive company where you can kind of hide in the background and just get by. You're going to be front and center. You're going to be asked to get involved
Yeah.
in stuff that you're not comfortable with. So you've got to have that buy-in, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that. But thinking then, okay, about you, and you've gone through 2 career switches at this point, like, is there anything surprising that you've learned about yourself through this?
I'd say I'm more comfortable with risk than perhaps I thought I was. I'd always considered myself, like, it's always sort of been a joke with my friend group that I'm sort of 30 going on 60. I'm safe. Everything's sort of planned out. But yeah, surprised me. I was more open. You know what I mean? On paper, it's a wild decision to leave that job and to join a startup that, you know what I mean? There's some horrible figure, isn't there, that 80% of startups fail within the first 3 years or something.
Yeah.
Which, again, I didn't learn till after I joined a startup. But it surprised me that I was willing to take that risk, really,
Yeah.
looking back now.
Yeah, I suppose so, especially when you think that, like, you know, the reason you're leaving the military is for family reasons.
Yeah,
You know,
but I'll temper that with, like, yeah, working a startup is hard and there's a lot going on, but there's a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more flexibility than I had in the military, and there's also a lot more flexibility than I had in aviation as a civvy engineer as well. You know what I mean? That's a very much a clock in, clock out, a 15-minute break here. You know what I mean? You were 5 minutes late, sort of thing. So that's been a real benefit for me, for family life. There's been the flexibility of the startup. It's taken a bit of getting used to, don't get me wrong. I'm sure Ben was pretty annoyed with me in the first few months when I was texting him to let him know I was taking an extra 10 minutes at lunch and things like that. But it took a little while to get used to that. But it's definitely been one of the big draws for me, the big benefits.
Yeah, definitely. And your role now, then, can you see any overlap between the skills that you were using when you were an aircraft engineer and the skills that you need now?
Yeah, I think it's probably a lot I don't really think about too much. But like the big one is definitely the adaptability side of things. And again, I alluded to it earlier, but the military, yeah, it looks like it's a big, well planned, well thought out organization, but you'd be amazed at how many times you're just dropped in the middle of stuff and expected to make it work.
Yeah.
And that definitely ties over to the startup stuff. And then the other thing is, like, for me, the nature of aircraft engineering is you have got to be meticulous. Literally, you have got, and it's drummed into you during training, you've got people's lives in your hand. Everything you touch on an aircraft, you sign for to say exactly what you've done, how you've done it, and what publication you did that in accordance with. And that paperwork's held for 5 years. So if anything happens to that aircraft 4.5 years after you did something wrong on it, you'll be found out. You're liable for it. Legally, it's your problem, your fault.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely tied over that sort of meticulousness, that attention to detail, which has been,
Yeah. God, the pressure of that, of not slipping up and making mistakes.
Yeah, scary. I was involved in we had an aircraft that had a crash, and I'd 6 months previously done a huge job on it, like taking it into little tiny bits. And we had to wait a year for the investigation to be completed. And that was, even though you're pretty certain that you've done everything right, it's still a lot of weight a lot to think about. So yeah, I think that you know what I mean, that kind of working under that kind of pressure, it definitely carries over and stuff like this.
And I think that's with a lot of people that I've spoken to who have been in the military in all different kinds of areas, the stakes are considerably high. And I think that is then like something that you see across the board in veterans, that this attention to detail, risk appetite, ability to stay cool, like it stems from that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people underestimate it. Like I know I did when I got out. Like you don't really appreciate that not everybody's going through those kind of experiences, and you know what I mean, been expected to work in those kind of environments. So it's don't underestimate.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly haven't worked under those circumstances at all. So, cool. Okay, well, just to finish up then, can you think of any kind of actionable tips or takeaways for anyone really who's on the cusp of a career switch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is me in hindsight, looking back at what some of the stuff I did wrong, perhaps. The first thing would be definitely like consider other opportunities. Just because you've been an aircraft engineer for 16 years doesn't mean you have to stay as an aircraft engineer. There are so many, and I'm still being exposed to new roles now where I'm like, I could definitely do that. That's a thing I could do. So don't be channeled into something just because that's what you're being told as you transition out, or as that's what you see other people doing. I can appreciate we see people get out and be successful as a project manager. So we're like, well, I've done a bit of that. I manage stuff in the military. That's what I should do. be open to other opportunities. Think about it, consider other careers, I think. And
Yeah.
second one, again, something I didn't do well enough and something that I'm seeing the value of so much now, but it's just network like crazy. I think I've noticed that people seem to be more helpful once they're out of the military. There's definitely like the veteran network seems to be very strong, very approachable, and like will go above and beyond for people. So yeah,
Yeah.
it feels weird and unnatural to start with like reaching out to strangers on LinkedIn and pestering people to learn about their company or their role perhaps, but just don't underestimate it. It's super valuable. And then the third thing for me, and it's again something I didn't do as I transitioned out, but look at the sort of the hidden metrics, I suppose, of a job before you accept it. So on paper, my first role was amazing. It was good money, it was good sort of progression, it was good shift, but you've got to sort of dig into the sort of things that you don't necessarily see in the job description, like what's the company culture like? How fulfilled are you going to be doing something like that? You know what I mean? Is the progression as linear as it looks on paper? Are people actually hitting those milestones within the company? So,
Yeah.
and again, that's something you're going to achieve through networking. So, yeah, don't be shy, but look at those things that perhaps you're not considering on the face of it.
Boom. Yeah. All right. This has been great. Thank you so much. And I think, to anyone who watches this or wants to hear more, you speak to veterans every day, don't you, about career switching. So anyone can get in touch and obviously join the Redeployable community to speak to you or to speak to anyone going through a similar situation.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got so many people in there now at various stages of this journey who are all willing to give their time and their expertise, their advice to other people. So yeah, definitely get in there and use it. That's what it's there for.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Doc.
No, lovely. Thank you very much, Anna. Speak to you soon.